Good evening, Panthers. We are taking a look at section 2.5, solving equations with integers. We're going to spend 2 days on section 2.5. We're going to split it up and spend 1 day with just equations that involve adding and subtracting integers. And then we'll spend an additional day solving equations, but look at multiplication and division. So just a reminder, please have your notes out in front of you and a pencil. Remember, you can pause me as needed. Make sure you watch the entire video. And here we go. Before we begin, I want to remind you your rules for adding and subtracting integers. Okay. Remember, if you have a subtraction problem, we don't really do subtraction. We spend a great deal of time learning the rules for adding, and it's much easier to keep the same addition rules than to learn separate rules for subtracting. So we learned that if you have a subtraction problem, you change it to addition, and you don't just change a subtraction problem to an addition problem. You have to change the subtraction sign to an addition sign, and then change the number behind it to its opposite. And again, we've worked on this, so this is not news for you. And then once you have an addition problem, you follow your addition rules. Remember, you have to determine if you have more positives or negatives, and that'll tell you the sign of your final answer. If the signs are the same, in other words, they're both negatives or both positives, you add the absolute values together. And if the signs are different, remember the different sounds like the word difference, which means to subtract, you subtract the absolute values. Okay, so let's take a look at some problems. Example 1, the directions say to solve each equation, and of course we know when we're solving equations we need to check each answer. And here it says mentally, but I'm actually going to ask you to show all of your work. So Panthers, when you're looking at equation, remember step 1, you are going to draw the line down the equal sign. Remember that separates both sides of the equation, and that way when you do the step of doing the same thing to both sides, you can clearly see both sides of your equation. We're going to locate our variable. If you put your finger over y, which is our variable, you see that we have a 7 with a subtraction sign in front of it. And again, remember, use the signs in front of the terms. And we're subtracting 7. Now, the inverse of subtracting 7 is adding 7. And if I do it to one side, I must do it to the other. Now, when you're solving equations, Panthers, in a second, you're going to see any time that you can add as your inverse operation, take advantage of that, and I'll show you in a minute why. So subtracting 7 and adding 7 are inverse operations, so they cancel each other out, and you're left with your variable of y. Now when we look on the right hand side, we have to take a look at what operation we're performing, which is addition. So stop and think for a second about what your rules are for addition. Hopefully you're thinking, oh, I have 19 negatives and 7 positives, so I have more negatives, so I know my answer is going to be negative, so write your negative sign. And in this case, the signs are different. I have a negative and a positive, and therefore I am going to subtract. Now luckily, the problem's already set up pretty easily as a subtraction problem. 19 minus 7 is 12. So I get my answer of negative 12. However, Panthers, we are not finished. We need to plug negative 12 back into our original equation for y and solve. Y this time is negative 12. From that, we are subtracting 7. Now, Panthers, we have a subtraction sign, so stop and think about the rules for subtracting. Remember, instead of subtracting, we add. The opposite of 7 is negative 7. Okay, now let's proceed. Panthers, do we have more negatives or negatives? More negatives, Mrs. McNally. So you put your negative sign down, and the signs are the same, so we add 12 and 7, and we get an answer of 19. Let's check. Negative 19, negative 19. Check. Let's move on. Letter B. Step 1, draw your line down the equal sign, again to separate both sides. Our variable is on the left, it is p. So if you cover up p, we are adding 8. Now here's where I want you to think for a second, Panthers. Yes, the opposite of adding 8 is subtracting 8. Okay? But Remember, if I put subtracting 8 here, I'm setting myself up with a subtraction problem. And I'm going to create a lot of extra work for myself, because if I write it as a subtracting 8, I am then going to have to convert it to an addition problem later on. So I'm going to try to save you a step here. I want you to think for a second. I'm going to write these two down. So you're looking in the upper right hand corner. I wrote negative or minus 8. Is adding, I think I'd write this. Sorry, we're starting with plus 8. Okay, right? Plus 8. Is adding a negative 8 the opposite? Let me ask you this. Adding a positive 8 to a negative 8, are they opposites of each other? I hope you're thinking yes. Okay, so instead of writing subtracting 8, I want you to try to keep everything as an addition problem. Instead of adding, obviously adding 8 here would not be the opposite, but adding a negative 8 would work, right, Panthers? Adding 8 and adding a negative 8 to that, they would end up canceling each other out. So again, try to keep everything as an addition problem. If you do it up front, it's less work in the end. So over here, again, I'm doing the same thing, adding a negative 8. So we're left with P, and again we go to our integer rules. I'm adding here, so that's good. It's all set up as an addition problem. The signs are the same, so I add, and of course I have more negatives, so I put my negative sign down, and we get an answer of negative 17. Panthers, let's check. I have negative 17 plus 8. Remember our rules. I have more negatives. The signs are different, so I subtract. Do these match? They do. Therefore, I'm confident that my answer is negative 17. Let's take a look at C. Line, okay, my variable is x. If I take a look at the same side as x, I have a negative 12 here. Again, look at the sign in front of the term, not the plus sign behind it. Okay, so here we are, again, it's like a negative 12. So let's think again, we're going to be adding that, its opposite. What is the opposite of negative 12? It's positive 12, okay? So we're adding the opposites, and again, if I do it to one side, I must do it to the other. These opposites cancel out, and we're left with x. On this side, it's all set up with an addition problem. I have more negatives, so my answer is negative, and the signs are different, so I am going to subtract. Panthers, let's plug that back in. We have negative 12 plus negative 4. I have more negatives, the signs are the same, so I add, and again they match up, so check. I am confident that my answer is negative 4. Let's look at D. Line, this time my variable's on the right. On the right hand side I am adding 3, so again we're going to keep it as addition, but what is the opposite of 33? You're right. Hopefully you just said negative 33. So I'm going to add a negative 33 to both sides. Okay, my opposites cancel out and I bring down my variable, and again it's all set up here as an addition problem. I have more negatives, so I have 33 negatives and only 7 positives, and the signs are different, so I'm going to have to subtract here. So again, obviously I can't do 7 minus 33. Always take the larger absolute value and subtract the smaller absolute value. So if I did 33 minus 7, I get 26. So I get negative 26 as my answer. Let's check. Plug it back into the original problem. I have negative 26 plus a positive 33. And Panthers, again, it's an addition problem, so I have more positives. So I know my answer is going to be positive, but here the signs are different, so again I'm going to have to subtract. So again, take the larger number 33 and subtract 26, and you get a positive 7, which matches. So I know I have checked, and I know I have 100%. Okay, Panthers, moving on. Letter E. here's a subtraction problem, okay? Here's what I would suggest for you, okay? I'm looking at this, and it is set up as a subtraction problem, so I'm going to go ahead and fix this. It's not going to change anything, but instead of subtracting, we add. The opposite of negative 19 is positive 19, and this will help you go forward on your problem. So again, we're going to add. We're always going to add when we do our inverse operation. We're going to do the opposite of 19, which is negative 19. Okay, my opposites cancel, and over here I have more negatives, and the signs are different, so I subtract 16 from 19, and I get 3. When I go to check, go back again, look at our original problem. We have a plus 19, so let's do negative 3 plus 19. I have more positive, so the answer is positive, and the signs are different, so I subtract the 2. And again, these end up matching, so I check it off. And letter F. Again, I'm going to add. The opposite of negative 12 is 12. So I do it to both sides, so I keep my equation balanced. The opposites cancel out, and then over here I have more negatives, so my answer is negative. The signs are different, so I subtract. We check our work, plug it back in. I have negative 11 plus a negative 12. Okay. Panthers, I have more negatives. That's all I have, and the signs are same, so I add. And again, these two answers match, so I'm confident that I have the right answer. Moving on. G. Again, I'm going to add, but I'm going to add the opposite. The opposite of negative 7 is a positive 7. Okay. Cancel out. I have negative 7 plus its opposite. What happens when we add opposites together? We get 0. Okay, and if I plug 0 back into my equation, 0 plus a negative 7, the signs are, I have more negatives, and the signs are different, so I subtract. Check. And letter H. Draw my line. B is on the right. Let's just go ahead and change this right now, so it helps us. We are adding a positive, so let's go ahead and add a negative 21. And again, we do it to both sides to keep things equal. Cancel out. Here we have addition again. More negatives or negatives. Panthers, hopefully you said negatives. The signs are the same, so we add. We get an answer of negative 54. Let's plug that back into our original equation, which was B, or negative 54, and again, remember we added 21. Okay, we have more negatives, and the signs are different, so we subtract. We get negative 33, negative 33. Check. So Panthers, again, we just focused on addition and subtraction, and we combined it with our rules for solving equations. So make sure your notes are filled out, and before you leave, I have a joke for you today. Panthers, if there are 4 apples and you take away 3, how many do you have? Think about that, and I'll get back with you tomorrow. Have a good day.